Hello and welcome to the Chili Dog Strings podcast. I'm Neil Fong-Gilfillan.
And I'm Rachel Sampson. Thank you for joining us as we open up new conversations in the world of music education. Hello, everybody. Rachel Sampson here from Chili Dog Strings for another episode of our podcast. Today, we are interviewing Allison Lint, a violinist currently based in Hays, Kansas. She will be visiting the DFW area this weekend to give a concert at Fort Worth's Steinway Hall to raise awareness and funds for Violin for Vasculitis, a nonprofit awareness project initiated by Allison. So, welcome, Allie, to our podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So before we dive into Violin for Vasculitis, I just want to share a little bit with our audience about how we are connected. So Allie and I, Allie and I go way back to Cleveland, Ohio in 2003, I think. I think that's right.
Probably somewhere around there.
Yeah, or really, I guess technically it'll be Hudson, Ohio, at the Encore School for Strings, the summer before I moved up there. So we were at Encore together, and COYO, the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra, and I think the year after that, it was 2004, 2005, that season. Is that when you joined the Young Artist Program as well?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
So, we studied chamber music together in a couple different groups, if I remember. And we spent Saturdays in Cleveland's acclaimed Severance Hall. And we were just spoiled by its lush acoustics. And I think it was 2005. We were learning, it was either a Mendelssohn or a Beethoven quartet in school. And I just remember noticing as time went on, you were more and more absent. And then we remember asking in a meeting, where's Allie? And I think Miss Mateo said something about you having pneumonia. And the next thing I know, Michael Kaufman and I are getting lost trying to visit you in the hospital. And I just remember being so shocked at how serious everything had become in such a short period of time. And I wasn't totally sure what had happened, but I was really grateful that you survived it. So with that, would you mind telling our audience a little more about your nonprofit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What I did was, it really is quite a long story. And what you did was set us up for how sick I really was. And it's very interesting to hear your perspective, Rachel, because I haven't heard that side of things for a long time. And I forgot that you guys were some of the first ones to really know that, how sick and how quickly it got serious. I mean, this disease really was life-threatening.
Yeah.
So, and we can talk about that a little bit more later, what vasculitis is and all of that. But ultimately what ended up happening is the following year, in May of 2005, I was finally diagnosed with something called, at the time, was called Wegener's granulomatosis, which is a form of vasculitis. And in the years since, they've renamed the disease. Now it's called granulomatosis with polyangiitis, which makes, we abbreviate it to QPA because nobody except the patients and the doctors can actually say it. But what that does is make it a little bit more recognizable to doctors and a little bit easier for them to readily accept what it is just by the name. They can find out what the disease is instead of having to look into it. But it's a type of vasculitis which affects the blood vessels. What it does is it has to do with vascular inflammation. And what had happened to me was it attacked my respiratory system, it attacked my lungs. And because the lungs are not only so completely filled with blood vessels and such an integral, crucial part of your body, obviously you're using them all the time, it happened very, very quickly. It went from bronchitis to pneumonia to flat on my back in the hospital and then slipping into a coma. And of course, as you said, that all happened kind of at the end of the semester. hit us all very quickly. I think I had to take a couple of incompletes from the classes that fall, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So it was a very scary time. But what I went on to do is went through all of this treatment and accepting this disease and figuring out what was going on. And, I was 17 years old, for gosh sakes. I mean, I didn't know what was happening. And my family was trying to come to grips with all of this. And meanwhile, it's like, well, I want to go to conservatory, so how's this supposed to happen when I've been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness? And so it was a really, really terrible time for this to happen. And it was really frightening for everybody involved. That said, fast forward about 5 or 6 years. And in 2011, I ended up setting up a nonprofit project, and what that does is bring awareness and funding to the Vasculitis Foundation, which is a great resource for patients of this disease, but also to the patients themselves. And so what I'm doing is traveling to each one of the 50 states to try to kind of spread the message of, these are the symptoms of this disease, this is what can happen, this is what happened to me. And to those with no knowledge or interest in the medical field whatsoever, it's a story. It's a story about a person's will to survive and overcoming this thing, and then what I've done with my life since then. And so it's really a project that has touched a lot of different people in the vasculitis community, in the musical community, and certainly, people that I know, just my friends and family and musical associates. So it's been a great project so far. Texas is number 23, baby.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, man, it must be so sweet traveling all around. Your most recent travels were to Hawaii, is that right?
Yeah, man, I was there a month ago, and that was obviously kind of when I started the project, was thinking like, well, Alaska and Hawaii will totally be the last two, right? But just the way things turned out, I had actually one of our mutual friends, Rachel, from the Cleveland Youth Orchestra, Joe Stepik, professor out there at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and so when he got the job out there, we talked, and he said, hey, Hawaii needs to happen sooner than later. And he set up a class, and we talked to the students, and we went out there, and we had a couple of classes, and then I was also involved with like the solo and ensemble program out there for the weekend and stuff. So that was really, really cool. And so now, obviously, the next thing after Texas has to be Alaska, is what I say.
That's great. So this will be your first time coming to Texas for V4V?
Yes, actually, not just for the project, but forever. I have never been to Texas.
What?
Yes, I know. I've been all around the country. Like, some travels you do for the project and some you do just because, or vacations or whatever, just to explore. But I have never, ever been to Texas. So I'm totally excited and thrilled.
Oh, that is awesome. Number 23. Very, very cool. Well, we are honored to have you. It's going to be great. So let's see here. I guess the next thing, I think you touched on it briefly, sort of what Violin for Vasculitis means to you and sort of what it looks like to others. So at what moment did you realize that Violin for Vasculitis could be a thing? Was it like a very natural, like, oh, well, of course I'm going to do this because I'm sick and I play the violin and, I want to share my story with people? Or did it like take a little time for that to sink in, the way the project turned out?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, of course it didn't just occur to me. I mean, these things take time. And going from being completely ill to, like I said, I mean, my family didn't know if I was going to survive. It was a really scary time. To getting the diagnosis the following year. And then, like I said, it was 6 years before I really started thinking about this and thinking, I'm not content to just be sick. Right. That's not enough for me. I want to share my story with other people because there has to be something here and there has to be something that I can do. And the overwhelming thought or goal or drive to me was that I never want other people to have to experience this again, especially other teenagers. I mean, it's so unfair. The teenage years are so hard anyway. Mm-hmm. And then to have an illness, to be diagnosed with a chronic illness is just like, really, life, really, universe, So part of my focus in this project is to reach teens and young adults who have been diagnosed because it's really, really tough on them. But so I'm thinking all of this over and I'm saying, okay, I want to do something with this. There are these aspects of my life that I think I can put together and make something out of them. Number one, I've got this illness. Okay, let's push that to the side for now. It's under control. I'm in remission. I'm basically going to be okay now. It's never going to be in a life-threatening position ever again. That's great. then I continued with my music studies, and it's like, well, how do you put these two things together? And then I've always been, I don't know how apparent it is, but, you know, I'm not an incredibly introverted person. So I knew that I have this way of kind of reaching out to people and talking to people and being very comfortable in a crowd and in front of people and things like that. So I knew that somehow if I put these things together, I could become some kind of ambassador or something. I'm thinking it over. And I'm talking to my friend about this. This is a friend who, actually, I'm not even in contact with them anymore, but a friend at the time, we were on the phone, and she said, well, why don't you do something that's really going to get people's attention? And then you can be like the face for vasculitis or something like that. You know, we've got Michael J. Fox for Parkinson's disease. We've got, you know, certain celebrities are starting to step up for things like lupus and for other, you know, chronic autoimmune disorders, things like that. But we don't have anybody for vasculitis. We just don't. We don't have any celebrities. And I use that word loosely because I don't see myself as that now. But at the very least, I can be like, look, I'm a human being that has this, and somebody's got to think about it.
Yeah.
Why not me? I've got a career that's on the stage connecting with people. I mean, why not use that as a platform? So my friend said, look, you have to do something big to get your message out there. And she said, wait, I got it. She said, why don't you go to every state in the country and talk about vasculitis? And I was like, no, really, that's great. Okay, anyway, moving on. That was kind of the reaction from her, which was cool. And so we hung up the phone. I'm like, all right, bye. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, how cool would that be? Go on a mission and travel and do this thing where you're kind of like, you're really, it's a mission to take the message to all these different places in the country, because we were so lucky, Rachel. We were so lucky to be in Cleveland. I was so lucky to be in Cleveland. We've got the Cleveland Institute and the Cleveland Clinic right there.
Right.
If that Cleveland Clinic had not been there, if I had not lived in Cleveland at the time, I might not have made it.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the top vasculitis centers in the country. And at the time, they still do have some of the top doctors working there. But think about these people in rural Mississippi. There is no vasculitis center in Mississippi.
Right.
Think about these people in the panhandle of Florida or in Northern California or in Wyoming. There's no vasculitis center around. What do they do when they get diagnosed? What do they do when they go to the doctor with these respiratory symptoms and there's nobody there who knows anything about vasculitis?
Right.
So I figure if I could reach 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 people in every state, by the end of the tour, that's thousands more people that have heard of vasculitis, and it's a start.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So have you, I don't know, in some of those more rural areas that you're talking about, people that have been diagnosed, do you find that when you meet them and you tell them your story, that you're able to connect them to resources that help them to get help? Or is it just more like, hey, there are more of us out there? Like, do you have any? Yeah. Well,
it's twofold. I mean, yes. The answer is yes. Whenever I show up somewhere, there is usually somebody in the audience who comes up to me after the performance or after the lecture, and they say, hey, I know this person who has been having these strange oddball symptoms for years and years and years. Is this something they should talk to their doctor about? And it's like, well, yes. I mean, vasculitis is very hard to pin down. So I always say, yes, absolutely, bring it up to the doctor. And I've actually heard back from a couple of people that they're now being you know, the doctors are seeing how the disease is presented, and they're actually looking into vasculitis. And so that's obviously a great thing when you hear from somebody down the road that's like, yeah, I'm talking to my doctor about it. But there's also people in the audience who have already been diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the people who, like I said, especially teens and young people, who I find it most important to reach, because when you are diagnosed with something like this, it's a very lonely road, and it's a very scary road. Really know where to turn. I mean, it's you feel as though you've been handed a death sentence or a life sentence, or however you want to look at it, when in reality, life goes on. You're just adjusting to a new normal, being sick.
Mm.
So this is something that I can reach people who have already been diagnosed, but I can also take the message to people who know somebody who might be thinking about what's going on, or you know, and the best thing, Rachel, is when you have healthcare professionals and doctors in the audience. That's the best thing, because I have doctors come up to me and say, in all my years of medical school, I have never heard the word vasculitis. Or they'll say, yeah, I remember we went over it for one day in my rheumatology training. We went over it for like 1 day or 2 days or something. But now, hearing your story, I'm ready to go home and look into this and research it more and know everything I can know about this, so that if my patients present with it, I know what I'm looking at now.
Right.
So that's really a cool thing. But in the end, I point everybody to the Vasculitis Foundation, because that's what they're there for. It's a patient and doctor resource, and they do wonderful work. And I work with them on almost a weekly basis, and we're in very close touch. So they really are great at getting the word out there and connecting with doctors.
That's wonderful. With that foundation, is that who you raise money for? Is that when you're raising money and raising awareness, is that where the money goes, or?
Yeah, it's two parts. One of it is obviously traveling from place to place gets expensive.
Sure.
So what I do is I have an expense account for my nonprofit. And when I do raise money at these events, which it depends what the event is and how many people are in attendance and that kind of thing. But if I do have any fundraising that comes out of each event, what I'll do is put the money in the travel account, which will then get me to the next state, whether it be gas money or a plane ticket or a train ticket or whatever it takes. And then whatever from that lump sum is left over directly to the Vasculitis Foundation. So I'm cutting them a check like every month or every 2 months. And then that way they're getting some funding also, which is going right to the source. And they fund doctors, and they have chapter meetings all over the country and these things. And so really the idea is for everything to go back to them so that they can help patients, because my job is just to kind of be the face and be the story and the message, and then that way they can turn to the VF and say, hey, here's what I need.
Right. Okay. And how much money do you think has been raised by all of your efforts all these years so far?
Oh, I mean, thousands of dollars. And it's really hard to put a ballpark figure on it, because you can look at it as money that's gone back into the project that's propelled me forward. You could look at it as, if you take all that away and just what's been donated to the foundation.
Sure.
There are people who write checks to the Vasculitis Foundation that I never see. You know, outside of my events, they'll go home and say, well, I'm going to make a donation. They go home with these envelopes that are in the program. And so there are donations that I never even see. In fact, the cool thing, if I can get anecdotal here for a minute,
Sure.
About a month ago, I got a message from the it was a letter, I guess, from the Vasculitis Foundation, and it said, congratulations, we wanted to let you know someone set up a donation in your name. And I was like, that's strange. I didn't hear anything about that. Yeah, it was somebody who I knew way back in Akron, had made a donation last December, and he's a nurse and also a musician, and so this project really touched him. And what he did was make a donation, but he sent it right to the Vasculitis Foundation and then put Violin for Vasculitis in the memo line. So I never even knew of that donation's existence until the VF then told me about it and was like, hey, this is what's going on behind the scenes. This is what you're kind of doing to help raise money for us. So that was really gratifying to hear about that.
That's awesome. That is so touching to hear. I'm just so moved, and I feel like
well, you're probably super moved because you were there and you saw the happened, you know?
Exactly. And I've played in Michigan for your event, and so I know what it looks like, and I think I knew what it looked like. I knew what it was for, but I haven't checked in on you and the project for a while, and it just sounds like it's grown so much and that you're just making a phenomenal impact. And I just, I'm such a crybaby. I can't cry on my podcast. No, but it's just, I'm so happy for you, and I'm proud of you, and I think what you're doing is wonderful. So it's really cool to hear about all of that. I'm very moved.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's grown a lot since we played in Ann Arbor together. And actually, I was thinking, this is really cool. If you want to talk for a minute about the musicians who joined me on these things.
Yes.
let's talk about this, because how awesome is this? You played with me in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, way back in, that would have been 2012.
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. Somewhere around, it was 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. And then Lauren Siborowski, who's the pianist, who's going to be joining us in Texas, she's coming from Colorado Springs. She's actually flying down to play in this. And Lauren and I played, she owns a gallery in Colorado Springs called the Modbo Gallery, and or co-owns the gallery, I guess. And she and I set up the second ever Violin for Vasculitis event was in Colorado Springs at her gallery. So Lauren has already played with me in 2011. You played with me in 2012. And so it's so cool. And then we've got Joe joining us. Joe Orslitz, a trumpet player who I went to grad school with in Akron. And the way that this project brings these people together, I mean, in a selfish way, it's my friends. It's my compadres from back in the day, and we all get together again and make music again. But it's also taking this message to musicians and saying, hey, use music for a purpose. Don't just play it. Don't just sit in your basement practicing. Don't just sit around writing music. You've got to do something with it.
Right.
That's what I found to be the most gratifying thing. Is I can't even imagine if I just had a symphony job and taught a little bit and that's all I did. I mean, this is something that goes so far beyond that. This is my life, and this is touching people's lives who I never would have met were it not for this chronic diagnosis. So that's a very cool thing.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, I was sort of noshing on that idea as well. Like, how cool is it that you have a complete network of musicians all over the country that you're like, I think I'd like to go to Missouri. Who do I know in Missouri, you know? And like, you know, I think that brings up a great lesson, a great point that when you're young, you have absolutely no idea the people that you run into, that you interact with on a daily basis, how they're going to connect in your life later. And I just think that maybe this is unique to music, but I really don't think so. You know, all these people you go to school with, maybe it's just that person that's always in that corner practice room when you're looking for a practice room, or maybe it's the guy that sits behind you in theory class, or maybe it's your best friend or your roommate, you know. Down the road, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like we all scatter around because you can't all get the same job in the same place. And here we are. We're just like ready and waiting for someone like you to take advantage of it. And I think that's great. It's so cool.
We're waiting for you to take advantage of it. No, but it's true, and I mean, you make it sound so easy. Like, I think I'll call Connecticut and see who I know.
Maybe it's not that easy.
But on the other hand, that is kind of how it works. It's like, think about it. You know, we went to the Cleveland Institute of Music, where people go and then they get these orchestra jobs and they scatter. Or, and you know, before that, or I should say after that, after CIM, I went to Oberlin, and there's people from, you know, who go to Oberlin and then just go all over the country, all over the world.
Right.
And then after that, you know, you get a grad degree, and that introduces you to even more people. And so if there's a lesson here purely from a professional musician standpoint, or to students, you know, which is don't let go of the contacts that you make. And if there's somebody who you connect with either on a personal level or a professional level, or you're playing chamber music and you really rock it when you get in there and play a quartet piece together or something, hold on to that person, because you never know what will come up later, and you could be collaborating again. So that's kind of been one of the gifts from this project. Again, I mean, on a personal, selfish note, is that I get to see all my old friends again and get to create music with them again. That's pretty sweet.
Absolutely. On a human level, too, I think that's a really essential thing to sort of pinpoint and nail down. I remember one time on Facebook, I was just scrolling through my feed, and I saw something about, like, a crazy incident you had on a road trip, something about, like, your car breaking down and running into some strange men, or like, I don't even remember, but I just remember thinking, Allie must have the craziest road trip stories. And I was wondering if you have any that you'd like to share with us today.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, 2 come to mind right away. We'll get to the car one in a minute, but the other one that comes to mind is that I went to Salt Lake City in 2013, and as far as cool places to go, go to Salt Lake City. Like, I cannot say enough about that place. It is so neat. It's so isolated. It's so just kind of where it is, and there's nothing else around it for hundreds of miles. And there's so much history and culture. And that city, I really, really enjoyed going there. But I got there, and I made a huge mistake, which was I got off the plane and found the airport taxi and took me to the wrong airport where they did not have a reservation, or a hotel rather. Took me to the wrong hotel where I did not have a reservation.
Oh no.
It was a hotel by the same name, but on the exact opposite end of the city. So it was like 3.5 hours outside of the airport, and like $100 in taxi rides later, I finally found my way to the hotel.
Oh.
And at that point I had like an hour to get ready for whatever I had to do. And it was a disaster. But the other one, speaking of being late for things, it's the one that you allude to, which is in West Virginia. And at the time, so this is like, I don't know, this was a few years ago. And at the time, I had this like old clunker of a car, as we all do, kind of like out of high school and college. And I loved this car dearly, but it was constantly breaking down. And if somehow my dad listens to this podcast, thanks Dad for the car, but I'm so glad I'm driving something else now. Just had to stick that in there. But I was driving this old Mazda, and I loved this thing, but it just wasn't in that great of a shape. And so I drove something like 350 miles to where I was going in West Virginia. Fortunately, Ohio is right next door, and so it was a road trip versus a flight, so it was a lot less expensive. So I'm driving, and 20 miles from my destination. Okay, so I went 330 miles, and then 20 miles out, the car just stops. I mean, literally, I'm driving along, and all of the tachometer and the speedometer and everything just point to the ground.
Oh.
The car just literally shuts off. Like, I can't even describe how scary it was. And so I don't even know how I had the presence of mind, but I pulled the car over to the side of the road and just sat there and was like, okay, I'm in the middle of rural West Virginia with a car that won't turn on. I know nobody in town. I don't even know where I am. Because this was before people like used GPSs a whole lot, which sounds really ancient, but it was just years ago. So these, not to make the story too long, but these two guys in this pickup pull up. And like everything, every instinct in me is like, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to strangers, don't talk. But what else am I supposed to do? I'm stuck in West Virginia. So I cautiously roll down the window, and they're like, hey, we've been following you. We saw that you had an Ohio license plate and figured you didn't know where you were going. Is everything okay?
Aw.
And I was like, well, at this point, I don't have any better option. And so I let the guys kind of, I didn't know what else to do. I jumped in the pickup truck and we took my car to the shop, and Billy Bob's brother happened to be a mechanic. And so we went there and got the car fixed, and then I went on my way. But like, it was just, so talk about a human connection. I mean, I never would have met these guys. And I don't even, to this day, I don't even know their names, but they rescued me. And then they had this really cute dachshund in the backseat with them too, I think, which is what got me in the pickup. Bad story, bad lesson. Don't ever get in strange pickup trucks just because they have a weenie dog in the back seat. But at the time, it was, it was a weird and exciting thing to happen. So
let's just pray that no psychopathic killers are listening to this podcast. Note to self: keep a dachshund in the truck.
Yeah, we've been following you. You've got an Ohio license plate. I'm going, oh no.
Oh.
But no, fortunately, that story had a happy ending, and they really were just these sweet guys that just really wanted to help. But I wouldn't recommend you break your car down on purpose or anything. So
wild.
So yeah, adventure galore. Lots of adventures along the way.
That's awesome. Oh, that's great. So
I hope I didn't jinx it, Rachel. I'm driving to Texas too. I hope we didn't just like jinx it.
Oh no, there's no way. No way. And if so, how many hours is it from where you are to where we are?
Google Maps claims it takes 7 hours and 50 minutes, which means I'll get there in about 7. So, oops, did I just say that out loud? No, I'll get there pretty fast. I mean, I pretty much just get in the car and go if I have a destination. So it'll be between 7 and 8 hours.
Very good.
To Fort Worth.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
No.
Not bad.
Nah.
Okay, so, well, at the very worst, if you do break down there, somewhere in there, I've got some wood right here, I don't know. We'll be able to come get you. It'll be fine.
That's so sweet. Let's pretend like that's not going to happen now.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to know a little more about what all you're doing in Kansas.
Yeah, sure. So there's a pretty easy explanation for that. Basically, I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I mean, we both grew up in Northeast Ohio. And you know that place is just saturated with teachers and with orchestras and with opportunities. And that was wonderful. Getting my feet wet and getting into the professional sphere with music and getting my career on the road. That was great. Played in the Acrid Symphony for 3 years. Had a studio there, worked for a couple of music schools. And that was all fine and good. And then one day I realized, just like my project, I realized that there were probably places I could go and make a big impact. And I had been to Hays, Kansas, population 22,000, and that's when the college is in session. And we're talking not at all like Cleveland. I'd been there for a couple of fundraisers and kind of kept in contact with people here. And somebody one day said to me, you really should stay. And again, kind of like Violin for Vasculitis, I was like, okay, all right, sure. I'm going to go back to Ohio now, And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they don't really have the resources in this town that we do in a big metropolitan area like Cleveland or like Akron. And I decided to kind of take a leap, and I moved here and set up a private teaching studio. And that was the end of that, and I've been here ever since.
We know what that's like. Yeah. That's awesome. Isn't that funny what like the power of a mere suggestion can do?
Yeah, it's yeah, it's amazing. And yeah, you know what that's like. I mean, you start a studio from the ground and you have to attract the publicity, you have to attract the students to get there. And then at some point, I think with teachers, it becomes a little bit of word of mouth referral.
Yes.
Like you get to the point where somebody says, oh, she teaches our kids and we love her, so you should go to her too, kind of thing. So, but those beginning stages are tough. And I mean, I'm in a town where people have they have the money and they have the cultural interest to give their kids lessons, but they don't always have, the influence of a major orchestra to understand what good music is or to understand the quality education that their kids need. And so having had a good background and a good education and a good fulfilling, career in music already, I was able to bring that to this area and kind of try to raise the kids on that. And hopefully I'm making a difference, who knows? I mean, I've only been here a year and a half as of yet, but I really love it, and the weather's a lot better than Cleveland. Just going to throw that out there.
Word.
So. Yeah, which I'm sure you're also experiencing in Texas.
Yes, it's amazing what some sunshine can do, honestly.
Oh my gosh, no kidding. Ugh.
I'm like a totally different person.
Me too.
Yeah.
Totally get it.
So how do you get your kids to practice?
Oh, I don't. Are you kidding? What, you think my students practice better than yours?
Oh, one can dream.
I may be a little old-fashioned in this regard, but I totally believe in the power of bribery. No, that's a terrible way to put it. But in my studio, I have something that's called the treasure box. And if kids do what they're asked to do, and if they play on at least 2 recitals a year, and they practice what they're supposed to every week, and they come back and I can see that they're making a good effort, they're allowed to pick something out of the treasure box. And so for them, it becomes, actually, I had one kid last week, he said, I couldn't even believe it. I wanted to record it. It was amazing. He goes, I don't need to pick anything out of the treasure box. I think the satisfaction of practicing is good enough.
Oh, poster child.
Yes, I know. And I looked at his mother and I was like, what did you feed this kid this morning? Honestly, this is like what we want all of them to say. But so you start with the motivation, like, hey, you can have some candy, you can have some stickers. After every lesson they get stickers. I mean, you've got to make it fun. You've got to make lessons enjoyable, not just, okay, now you're here, let's play your scales until you get it right.
Right.
And whacking ruler on the desk. That's not going to help anything. You have to make it fun. You have to make it enjoyable. You have to really get them to see the fun in the music. And if that means occasionally straying, I don't know your philosophy on this, but if that means occasionally straying from the method book, or maybe not playing exactly what you would want them to play, but maybe hypothetically, I think because this actually happened last month, you get a kid who says, more than anything in the world, I want to play the theme from Titanic. Learn how to play high twos and low twos on the A string by playing Titanic, just as they can by playing, Gavotte from the end of book 1. I mean, they're still learning the same material. It's just a song that they can better relate to. So, and especially out here, country music and pop music is big. People don't really know a lot of classical music like they would in bigger areas. And so you have to work with what you have, which in my case is a lot of music that most teachers wouldn't even look at, but that's what I have to utilize, and so I do.
I like that. That's a very practical approach. You get the job done, even if the vehicle looks a little different.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. Did we come out? Here, let's see.
Uh-oh. Everything running smoothly over there?
Technical difficulties. I think I may have just run the battery out of the... That's fine. Sorry about that. So then what is your favorite stuff to teach? Like, is it a mixture of theory and, actually playing technique and history, or like what kind of stuff do you like to deliver?
Oh, goodness, that's a broad question.
It is broad, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. My mind is going in like 6 different places. It depends if I'm teaching piano or violin, or strings, I should say. What I tell the kids is that no matter what you're playing, I want you to know everything about the music. I want you to know who the composer is, what their life looked like. I want you to know what style the music is. So yeah, there's a little bit of a historical context there. And then based on that historical context, what does the theory of the piece look like? Is this pretty standard classical stuff? Is it romantic? Are we playing something that's pop music, so it's a little more modern? But whatever the piece is, I make the kid really think about it and research it and read as much as they can and find out as much as they can about the piece and who wrote it. And that way it gives them a really full understanding of what it is that they're playing. And in that way it becomes more than just black and white notes on pages. It becomes a fully human experience and a fully tangible, relatable thing to them. So I find that that's pretty effective when they're starting a new piece.
All right. So like pretty well-rounded and giving them lots of information. I wish I had learned that a lot sooner than I actually did. So I think that's great that you're offering that to kids. Like, oh, the dead man behind this piece was an actual person. He had a personality. He had his own set of struggles, and he had his favorite foods, and that's obvious, but not to a kid. It's like when they finally realize, oh, when I'm not at school with my teacher has her own life, like, I don't know, that light bulb didn't necessarily come on for me right away.
Yeah, I totally agree. A lot of times students will just see a teacher and they're like, well, you're obviously just a lesson teaching machine. And you're like, well, no. What more am I do things like this, for example, like kids come in my house and there's a bookshelf right away that they know if they want to read something, they can just grab a book off the shelf and run home with it. And then return it to me the next week or the next month or whatever. And so I like to raise, it takes a community to raise a child, right? It takes a village. I want to be one of those people who's not just, okay, I'm going to go play my scales for Miss Allison. It's going to be, I'm going to go and maybe learn something about music, or maybe I'll learn something about being human or life, or maybe we'll talk about some math or some science. That's how kids really learn, is you put an idea in their head that suddenly the light bulb come on and they're just like, wow, this is really cool. Like that was totally worth my whole lesson today, learning that. And it may not be music. I mean,
right.
Half of our job is to teach music. The other half is really being a psychologist, and being just a general educator. I mean, especially for the young ones. Yeah. It's not all about music all the time.
I agree with that. Oh, I think that's absolutely true, especially because a lot of ideas in music, I don't feel that they're isolated to music. Everything in this universe is connected. And so I actually think sometimes the most effective way to get your point across when you're teaching music specifically is to allude to how it spreads in other fields of study or just in life experience, So I absolutely agree with that. That is a very astute understanding. Okay, so teaching. Oh, I could gab about this stuff all day. In fact, I am looking forward to seeing you in person.
I know! Yeah, I can't wait.
And just talking the night away and probably eating some epic barbecue. That's going to be so great.
I've had barbecue. Well, I live in Kansas, right?
Right.
So I've had excellent Kansas City barbecue. I've had barbecue in Tennessee, barbecue in California, of all places, but I've never had good old Texas barbecue. So definitely looking forward to that.
I'm sure all the respective places think that their barbecue is life-changing, but I've heard that this barbecue is life-changing. So we'll have to go find out. And you can tell me with all your barbecue experience how it lands.
Yeah, hear it from a Kansas City girl herself.
Exactly. So for this concert on Friday, what are we going to be listening to? What are we going to be seeing? Can you tell us a little bit about who's playing and maybe what is roughly on the program or specifically on the program? Or
yeah, I would love to tell you who is playing because that's the coolest thing about this.
Yeah.
Now, let me preface this by saying sometimes with Violin for Vasculitis, I should say often, it's usually just me and a violin and a stage. And I end up doing a lot of talking, a lot of playing, a lot of explaining, and really conversing with the audience and having this kind of back and forth thing, and usually like a Q&A at the end and that sort of thing. This is a little bit different. So I would say about every 3 or 4 events, I have one that's chamber music. And in that one, I like to sort of zip up a little more and just let people enjoy the music. So I'm going to be playing violin. I've got a couple solo things to do. I've got some unaccompanied pop, which you take with you everywhere, of course. And then I've also got a Elgar, Salute d'Amour, which everybody loves. It's that real kind of romantic schmaltzy thing.
Sure.
But it's a crowd pleaser, So I'm throwing that in there. And that'll be with, like I said, Lauren from Colorado Springs is our pianist. And she will also be doing a solo piano piece by Satie. Then we have myself and Lauren joining Joe on trumpet to play something really cool, which is called the Trio for Violin, Trumpet, and Piano by Eric Awazin. And this is a guy who actually was born and raised in Cleveland and still works there.
Huh.
So Cleveland, yeah, really cool. Like Cleveland composer, and Joe and I, like I said, played his trio in grad school. And we actually, it was funny, we reached out to him by email to see if he would show up to the performance, and he never did. But I'm still hoping that one of these days he'll hear we're doing his piece and maybe show up. But so we're doing the trio, which will be neat, a couple of movements from that. And then your husband, who I've actually never even met in person. It's the funniest thing. We've been friends for like over a decade or decade and a half or something, but I've never met Neil. But so he's jumping on due to his good-natured self and his creative bubbly cellist thing he's got going on. He decided he's going to jump in, and we're going to do some violin cello duets, and then he's also going to do a modern piece. I can't remember the composer. Do you?
Is it Motz or no?
Yes.
Or was it
Yes.
Casado? I can't remember which one he's doing.
It's Rudolf Motz. Is that who it is?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's gonna jump in with a piece, and he was kind of explaining a little bit of this to me, and I was like, you know what? I totally approve. We're going to just add it to the program, and I can't wait to hear what that sounds like. It's going to be great. So he's even, out of the goodness of his heart is just like, hey, I have a couple of things I can do. And I was like, sure, why not? So, and actually I think I asked him first. And then once I kind of got him with one thing, it was only a matter of time. I was like, well, I could play this too. I'm like, yeah, bring it all on. So it's a very eclectic program. Oh, and I forgot a trumpet solo also. There's a trumpet solo in there by John Williams. It's the With Malice Towards None. So that'll be done by Joe and Lauren. So very eclectic program. I typically like to go chronologically, so we'll start with the Bach and then go to the go through the classical and romantic eras, and then we'll get to the modern stuff. And in between each of the pieces, I'll probably say a little bit like, hey, this is what I'm all about. This is what the Vasculitis Foundation is all about. But mainly, as I said, for chamber music performances, mainly it's just a concert, and I hope that you come out to support a good cause and enjoy some good music. So that's what this will be on Friday.
Awesome. That is, I'm so excited to hear how the concert goes. I wish I could be there. Like, I wish I could play with y'all again.
Me too,
but,
next time.
Yeah, we'll just have to do it another time. Okay, so I think you kind of touched on this before. This is something that I think you just emanate, and that's the idea of like going beyond and being proactive and making an impact with what you're doing. And beyond practicing and performance, what do you do, or like what kind of message do you send, or do you just let your experience and just the experience of who you are speak to them? But what do you do to guide students to be proactive in making an impact with their instruments? Or not even students, but just other professionals or other musicians in general. Like, what kind of message do you send to them?
Right, I see what you mean. This is actually something that we spoke directly to at the masterclass in Hawaii at the university out there. And what I told the students was, each one of you has some kind of life experience or talent or human situation that is completely unique to anyone else that you know or will ever meet. Every person is an individual. You are not going through the motions of school and through your education just so that you can spit out the other side as just another orchestral player. That's not what we need more of. What we need more of, especially in this day and age, are people who are going to think outside the box and people who are going to be creative. And especially, there's such a big push nowadays for how do classical musicians reach a non-classical audience, right? So there's these projects, there's guy I went to school with at Oberlin and his wife have this project started now called Music in Familiar Spaces. And what they do is they play solo Bach and they do all of this early Renaissance music, and they perform at like breweries, and they have this thing called Bach and beer that they do. And so they're constantly stretching the limits of what's, considered to be appropriate in the classical world and where you would think of hearing classical music happening. So that is super cool. Obviously something like my project is yes, utilizing music, but for a purpose that has nothing whatsoever to do with music. And I think on that note, I think you'll find more ties between music and medicine than you ever thought possible. I mean, right. I'm finding them everywhere. There's doctors all over the country who actually are pretty good musicians, which is kind of cool. But but regardless, you are an individual who has something to offer the world. And what you can do is you can use music as that tool. Or you can have music be what you offer, but you need to do it in your own creative way, in your own individual way. And you have to explore what that means. I can't tell you what that is. So my job is to just inspire you to find whatever that is. Then you can take that and do something with it.
Got it.
So I think, I don't know, does that answer the question?
Oh, I think it absolutely does. And I think that's a message that more musicians need to hear, whether they're still students or professionals. I can't tell you how many people that I knew in school, I think maybe undergrads while I was in graduate school, who are reaching out or, talking on social media, just saying like, I have no idea what to do. I've got all this training and I don't have an underlying purpose. I don't have anything that's making me feel like this is all worth it. And that to me is, I can relate to it, first of all. And second of all, I found a purpose and I am doing what I can to make an impact in the way that's meaningful to me, but I totally understand what it's like to be there. And so I think what's so inspiring about what you do is like the actual content of what you're reaching out to do. I think that is so amazing, and you're just helping so many people, but also just the fact that like there's so much fire and inspiration and passion behind what you're doing because there's such a clear purpose. That's something that is such a gift. Like not every musician has that. So I think that's really wonderful that you're able to experience it and convey it to others. So
yes, and I would add to that too. Many musicians these days, and I hope I'm not making too sweeping of a broad sweeping generalization, but in my experience, what I found from talking to other musicians is that people are starting to realize that maybe music is their talent and it's their tool, but maybe it's not so much their passion as they thought. And by that, I don't mean I'm trained, but I don't enjoy music. That's not what I mean. What I mean is there's something else in your life that you actually want to speak louder. You can use music to do that. Right. Whatever it be. I mean, in this day and age, it's social awareness, right? It's civil rights. It's all of these things, politically that are bubbling to the surface. Musicians and artists are the number one speakers and advocates in this time, in this time of, of social uncertainty and political, however you want to think of it. I mean, musicians have a voice like they never have before. So it's amazing what you can do is say, well, yeah, I like playing, but playing for the sake of playing doesn't accomplish anything. But what if I play for this purpose or towards this cause or to help this particular sector of people or whatever the case may be. So there's more and more of that happening, and I hope we continue to see that trend because I think that's really neat.
Wonderful. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Oh, Allie, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you today. I feel like we covered a lot of great things, and I think the last thing I wanted to ask you, I know you'll cover it in the concert, but in case our listeners can't make it to the concert for various reasons, I just wanted to ask you one last thing, and that is for those that are listening, if they want to learn more, if they want to maybe donate, or they just want to help raise awareness in any number of ways, how would you suggest that they do that?
Okay, so it depends if they want to know more about what I'm doing. The easy thing is you can go to www.violinforvasculitis.org. That's violin, FOR, vasculitis.org. You can also follow my travels on Facebook. I have all kinds of social media videos that I post, and I'm always like, hey, I'm going out to this state. Is there anybody there who wants to collaborate or who wants to attend a concert? So I'm constantly reaching out to different places to see where are people in these areas. And if any of your listeners wanted to say, great, I'd love to be involved, that's fantastic. So they can also follow me on Facebook, and that one's facebook.com/ I think it's V4V Inc. So like V4VINC. Or you can just search Violin for Vasculitis on Facebook. That's fine too. Now, if you have more of an interest in the medical aspect of this, go directly to the Vasculitis Foundation websites. That's vasculitisfoundation.org. And that will tell you more about their organization and what they can do for patients. So if there's something along the medical lines, or if, who knows if there's somebody listening who for some reason wants to know more about vasculitis itself, I would definitely point you right to the foundation. Not that I don't talk about it, but they are very thorough and can give you the connections in the medical field. Got it.
Okay, great. Awesome. Is there anything else you want to add, or as we wrap up?
I just am thrilled to death to be coming to Texas, and I really can't wait to play the concert and, of course, see you guys again. And I'm happy to talk to your listeners, and if for some reason somebody contacts you and says, hey, the girl lives on your podcast, I want to talk to her, feel free to give out my contact information. I'll talk to anybody. So
cool beans. That's perfect. Well, thanks so much for making time for this morning. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah, let's not make it another, 7 years.
Bad habit, right?
I know. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'd like to thank Allison again for coming on to the podcast. Her concert is this Friday, March 24th at 7 p.m. in Fort Worth's Steinway Hall. I'd also like to thank Brian Wilson for letting us use his music on our intro and outro. This is Rachel from Chili Dog Strings, signing off.